listener production.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. You've probably seen ads promoting the new series of The Voice Australia, returning to our screens for a 14th season next month. But have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes? The show promises to give ordinary Australians with musical talent the chance to become overnight stars, and it's a ratings success. This year, the celebrity judges are Miller-Heidke, Spice Girl Mel C, Boyzone's Ronan Keating, and 1980s hitmaker Richard Marx. But have you ever wanted to know what happens beyond the lights, camera, and live audiences? Well, the good news is you're about to find out. Today, we're bringing you the inside story of The Voice from Listener's documentary team. This is episode 3 of The Moment It Changed, Touchdown, hosted by Nick Kelly.
The following episode contains mention of self-harm and references to family violence. In 2012, an exciting new music competition format lit up Aussie TVs. The Voice Australia promised to be different from the other shows. For one, it changed the language.
We were called artists, not contestants. They were called coaches, not judges.
It also invited artists, to submit their auditions online.
Where you filmed yourself at your house singing or whatever.
Online auditions were followed by in-person auditions off camera, where if producers saw fit, you were invited to audition on the show. Before you could step on stage though, you sat down for an interview. That's where Karise Eden found herself, at 19 years old.
They weren't interviews, they were interrogations. They basically, you walk in, they say, who are you, where are you, where'd you come from, you got any brothers, sisters, and the tone of the conversation changed when they said, when'd you finish school, how was school? And I sort of said, last year of school I completed was year 6, and I was homeless youth, I was a state ward and lived in all these refuges. And I remember by the end of the interview, the cameraman and the interviewer lady, they were crying and I'm sitting there going, oh, sorry, I'm just answering your questions, you lazy bugger, They pushed and pushed and pushed. And then I ended up in tears. And then that little snippet was what they blasted all over national TV. And that's how everyone met me.
An introduction pulling at the heartstrings sets the tone for Karise's time on The Voice as she heads into the show's signature blind auditions. These are what make The Voice really stand out. Artists walk on stage in silence, facing a live audience and the backs of 4 oversized chairs. Sitting in them are the coaches. For season 1 of The Voice Australia, that's Keith Urban, Delta Goodrum, Joel Madden and Seal. The music starts and the artist sings while the coaches are still turned away, focusing just on the singer's voice, not knowing what they look like. If a coach likes what they hear, they smack down on their buzzer and their chair swings around. If more than one coach turns around, the artist can choose one to be their mentor throughout the competition, joining that coach's team. When Karise Eden took the stage for her audition, it would alter the course of her life. In this episode, you'll hear how The Voice and the platform it provides has changed the game for music competition television. And Karise will reveal what really went on behind the scenes of the show.
I've been sitting on my veranda for a long time thinking about all this stuff. It's been a lot of years and I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I don't give a shit anymore. It is what it is and I'll just tell it.
I'm Nick Kelly, and this is The Moment It Changed, Touchdown. When Karise's audition airs, the first thing you see is her and her foster parents arriving together before that heart-wrenching interview that becomes her introduction to the country. She steps onto the stage and the band starts playing It's a Man's World by James Brown. There's barely 10 seconds between Karise starting to sing, her raspy voice sounding well beyond her years, and all 4 coaches slamming down on their buzzers. The coaches watch in awe as Karise belts out the rest of the song, her foster parents in tears watching in another room. With all 4 coaches to choose from, Karise goes with English singer-songwriter Seal, who was rendered speechless by her performance. More than a decade on, Karise's blind audition continues to grow online.
Yeah, people are still discovering that audition. It's racking up the views. It's never really stopped. Hitting up to 50 million views now, and, you know, all I see, honestly, is just a scared little chick not knowing what's going on. I can see it in my eyes. I look back at that audition and I just thought, oh, if you only knew what was coming, darling.
After her explosive audition, Karise went through to the next stage of the competition, the battle rounds. This is where each coach pairs up their team members to perform the same song in front of a studio audience. The artists sing together on a stage that kind of looks like a boxing ring. The coaches choose one from the pair to advance. Karise outsings her partner and makes it through to the next stage of the competition. Up until now, the show had been pre-recorded. These next performances went live across the country. Here, The Voice hammed up the emotional narrative they'd used when they introduced Karise.
Victim was definitely my character on that show, and it pulled on the heartstrings.
This narrative determined the songs she would sing.
The songs they chose for me gave this very, oh, poor girl, we love her and we want to see her succeed.
And what she wore during her performances.
The nun-type look that they dressed me in while I was on the show.
Long sleeves, floor-length dresses and skirts became staples of her performance attire. As the live rounds continued, 4 artists were eliminated each week, and now the Australian public got in on the action. Aussies could vote for their favourites by text, call, Facebook, or buying a recording of their performance from iTunes, which would count as 2 votes. It's a long way from the early days of Idol, where fans had to wait until after the finale to buy contestants' albums. Out of the artists that weren't chosen by the public, the coaches picked who went through and who left the competition. Karise was the clear favourite, winning the public vote week after week until it came to the semi-finals. 8 singers remained. 4 would go home. The night before her semi-final performance, where Karise was due to sing Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, it all became too much.
I had difficulty for my own reasons, and it all just snowballed into that one moment where I was just like, no, I'm getting off this show. I don't want to be. I'm not having fun. I want to go. I had a big argument with Seal and I said I was going to quit the show. We had a yelling match, and I do remember Seal ringing me. I think it was that night later in the hotel room, and we spoke for about 2 or 3 hours. I just remember him saying, oh, is that it then? Is that it then? Just going to give it all up?
Karise didn't give up. That conversation with Seal refocused her, and the producers readied her for her Hallelujah performance.
They dressed me from my neck to my wrist to my ankle and made me sing Hallelujah.
Dressed in all black, in a high-neck lace top, a long flowing skirt and guitar in hand, Karise sang another slow, sad ballad to match the sad backstory that had become her identity on the show.
I was very boxed in by what I could and couldn't do by using that story, and it was a very sad story where there's a whole other side to me that's full of life and energy and so much more music and so much more to tell.
The Australian public was obsessed. They had no idea Karise almost didn't make it onto the stage. Her rendition of Hallelujah shot to number 2 on the ARIA singles charts. It was no surprise when Karise made the grand final, where she battled it out as part of the top 4 and sang 3 songs, including an original Karise wrote called I Was Your Girl.
That was a song I wrote with a good friend of mine when I was 16. The only thing I didn't like about the fact that they chose that is I gave them about 4 of my original songs, and I know that they chose that song to go along with the story.
The lyrics speak for themselves. Who cares it still happened? I was kicked and left so stranded. All those years I spent alone, you expect me to crawl home.
And that only caused, I guess, a lot of heartache within my family.
The narrative the show was pushing was having a real-world impact on Karise.
Part of the moment that made Karise Eden who she was at that time on that show was hugely a part of my truth and my story and the life that I lived. And at the same time, I think that it was definitely exploited. It did not help. Any fragment of a relationship I could have had with anybody in my family was forever ruined. And it caused a lot of pain and it caused a lot of hurt.
The public was oblivious to the damage being on The Voice was causing Karise. To them, this was a success story. The teenager who was homeless and never went to high school was all of a sudden being watched by almost 3.5 million people in the grand final. And at the end of it, she was crowned the very first winner of The Voice Australia. The week after her win, Karise had 4 of the songs she'd sung on the show charting in the top 5 of the ARIA singles charts. She was the first artist to achieve this feat since the Beatles in 1964. Her prize for winning The Voice included a new car, $100,000, and a recording contract with Universal Music, which Karise says included delivering 5 albums for them. Before jumping in the recording studio, Karise knew exactly what she wanted to do with the prize money.
Pretty much put the deposit down and bought the place I still live in today. And that's how it changed my life. The story, the homeless girl bought a home and it's mine and no one can take it. And that was what was important to me. If this is my only chance, if this is the only time in my life, in generations of my family, to have this type of money, I know what I'm going to do with it. And I'm going to buy spoons and forks and screw you all.
Like many winners on music competition series before her, Karise's label rushed to release her debut album, recording studio versions of the songs she'd performed on the show. The album, My Journey, skyrocketed to number 1 and spent 6 weeks there. That's double the time Taylor Swift's album Red, released in the same year, had done. Then Karise headed out on the road, singing at shopping centres across the country. But after her shows, she started to notice a pattern in the way fans would approach her.
I think because of my story, people would share some really horrific truths, deeply ingrained in abuse or the foster care system. And I was way too young. I didn't know how to deal with people in their 40s talking about abuse or, someone with complex PTSD coming to offload trauma onto someone with complex PTSD, who's, 20 years younger than them. It's a very complex situation. I was recovering from it, still experiencing it, and had no idea what was coming next. Can I just say, it wasn't my idea to sing in churches.
Just a month after her win, Karise announced a national tour where she would perform in churches around the country. It was part of a series called Heavenly Sounds. Once again, Karise was greeted by fans who brought their darkest stories with them.
The straw that broke the camel's back for me was after one of the shows in Heavenly Sounds. These people came up to me and they were the adoptive parents of my father.
Karise didn't grow up with her father. Her mother left him when Karise was 4 weeks old.
And all I understood was he was a bad man, but there were a lot of bad people around him too when he was a child. And I thought, well, are there predators coming to my show? And I think that spun me into a downward spiral that I had no idea how to deal with. And I did something, the only thing that I knew how to do when I got to a certain point, and something that I hadn't done for years. And I self-harmed. And I ended up in a mental health unit. And the record company, everyone was screaming like, don't let this get out, don't let this get out, don't let it get to the media, don't this, don't that. I remember standing out the front of the hospital with my arms all bandaged up, and my manager's like, no, we're cancelling the tour. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I didn't expect to do that. I didn't expect that to happen. I'm okay. I'll get up, I'll sing the show tomorrow. I don't mind. And they're like, no, we're cancelling it.
In October 2012, the Heavenly Sounds tour was cancelled. And when Karise came out of the facility, she hoped she could pick up touring where she'd left off. Her record label told her it wasn't that easy.
You can't just cancel a national tour and then go out and do another one. You've got to prove to everybody, you've got to prove to venue bookers that you're not this or you're not that, and that you can be relied upon to be an artist, just to prove to people that, that wasn't going to happen again. But it was a lot of pressure.
The label had other ideas of what was next.
lay low, do some writing, let's focus on another album release. Let's, just hide away a bit.
Karise co-wrote all but one track on her second album, Things I've Done.
And then during that time, I fell pregnant with my son. And, definitely my life, motivations, goals, aspirations, everything about me changed. There was no congratulations. I was told there's someone in my life that said, don't do it. And that's coming from people within our Australian music industry in 2014. It wasn't that long ago.
By now, it was nearly 2 years since Karise had won The Voice. That and her pregnancy meant the label was putting the pressure on.
I was about 8 months pregnant, and I think they all just got scared and rushed, and they wanted to get this album out and wanted to this and wanted to that, and I physically just couldn't keep up with it, and there were a few health concerns throughout the process when I was pregnant. Trying to record stuff and get my vocals down and media appearances and all these sorts of things.
Things I've Done was released in 2014, 2 months before she gave birth. The album debuted at number 5 on the ARIA album charts. It would be 4 years before Karise released another album. This one, Born to Fight, was Karise's final release with Universal Music. A couple of years after its release, she met her now manager, who helped her leave the label, like so many other competition contestants had done before her. Universal Music released Karise from the deal that she had signed as a teenager.
Basically, they just ripped it up and said, "We wish you the best, Karise. Sorry it didn't work out, but we want to see you succeed."
In 2019, The Voice Australia added a new novelty, bringing back artists who'd appeared on previous seasons of the show, as well as former contestants from The X Factor and Australia's Got Talent, to contend on what was dubbed the All-Stars season. When Karise was invited to compete again, she politely declined.
I said, I've got my crown, thank you. I'll take that and I'll leave it at that. But they insisted.
Eventually, they reached a compromise.
We ended up agreeing on, I'll come out and do a group song, It's a Man's World, with all the group. And I said, as long as I get to play one of my originals as well. I was managing myself at the time, so I felt like I was in control that time going back.
Today, Karise has big plans for her future that go beyond music.
By the end of this year, I'll be cutting down, 90% of my touring and live shows. And I'm more interested in writing a book and public speaking and moving into other areas other than just live music. Stop being a kid, Karise. Grow up, Go to uni. Go get a degree in something and, have something else, And that's exactly what I'm doing. So we'll be putting some plans in place.
Karise is working towards studying veterinary technology. The goal is to open up an equine facility on the property she bought with her Voice winnings. It's been over a decade since Karise won The Voice, and she's had time to process the experience.
I guess, I speak a little cynical or critical for how I look back on the show, but at the end of the day, they are a fantastic platform. Would I let my children go on it? No. So I think that speaks enough.
In the 13 years since Karise won The Voice, the show's stayed on air and kept pretty consistent in the ratings. Most finales are the first or second most watched program on the night they air. Despite this, no winner has reached the immediate success Karise experienced. Harrison Craig, who won the second season of The Voice Australia in 2013, was the last to top the ARIA album chart. Celia Pavey, who also appeared on season 2, rebranded as Vera Blue and has had ongoing success. The show's also seen a rolling roster of celebrity coaches, a mix of homegrown artists and international music stars. By the 13th season of The Voice Australia last year, record label Universal no longer offered the winner a recording contract. Winners now receive $100,000 cash and a music masterclass and recording package with a studio in Sydney, a chance to develop their music without a label. Cutting ties with record companies is a big shift for both music reality television and the industry itself. When these competitions started, the grand prize of a record deal would be a dream come true to any contestant. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. It's clear the shows aren't producing huge stars, and yet there seems to be no shortage of aspiring singers competing year after year. So what does a hopeful artist auditioning for The Voice today want? And do they know what they're getting into?
Hi, I'm Matthew Hearne, a contestant on the most recent season of The Voice Australia. I'm also a musical theatre performer, an ex-professional soccer player and swimmer, and currently a barista in my spare time whenever I'm not acting.
Melbourne artist Matthew Hearne was forging their career in musical theatre in 2023.
I'd done sort of a few little independent theatre gigs, didn't really pay much. Not that we do it for the money, but, you know, you want to make a living doing the thing that you love, and that hadn't happened for me yet.
Alongside building their musical career, Matthew, who has cerebral palsy, a physical disability that impacts movement and posture, played for the Pararoos.
The Australian Paralympic soccer team, the Pararoos, we're a team that has been around for a long time, but not a lot of people sort of know that we exist.
Early that year, Matthew had been asked to sing the national anthem for a Socceroos match. A producer for The Voice saw a video of their performance and got in touch, asking if they wanted to audition in 2024.
I was a little hesitant at first, going in and doing reality TV. A lot of people sort of look at it as kind of like, you know, selling out or selling your soul or whatever. But after sort of having a think about it and going, well, what can I do on the show that I think is really going to make an impact? And I thought about my career as a performer, obviously, and the exposure that would sort of give me. But also I thought about my soccer team, and for a number of years we've sort of had to fight to make noise and to get eyes on us and things like that. And I thought, well, what an amazing opportunity this would be to sort of do that, to be able to sort of bring those guys along for that ride.
So Matthew says yes. With over 1 million viewers tuning in to each episode of the previous season, it seems like a good opportunity to get their message out there and maybe gain some more fans along the way. At 24 years old, Matthew makes it to the blind auditions of season 13 of The Voice Australia. Matthew's introduced as the athlete/musical theatre enthusiast. After alternating shots of Matthew in their national soccer team kit and sitting staring into an empty theatre, they take the stage. Matthew's parents, girlfriend, and a couple of teammates in the wings cheering them on. All 4 coaches turn their chairs for Matthew's rendition of This Is the Moment, a song from the musical Jekyll and Hyde. Meanwhile, the studio audience are up on their feet for a standing ovation. Matthew deliberately mentions their cerebral palsy on stage right away.
Harrison Craig was on the show and he had a stutter, but I'd never seen anyone on there with a physical disability, to my knowledge. And I think that making reference to disability and having it be visible and spoken about on television to millions of viewers, I think that's a really important part of breaking the stigma around it and sort of desensitizing audiences to disability. Obviously, mine is quite mild and it can be invisible at times. A lot of people don't really know that I have it until I talk about it. But I think that's all the more important to make it a real focus.
Being a professional athlete, Matthew's found himself in front of the camera before. They're no stranger to the media. Maybe that's why they could predict how things would work behind the scenes.
Ultimately, the producers are going to get the show that they want. I think you have to be willing to play the game, but also stay true to yourself and find a way to do that. And I think most of the time that's possible.
By 2024, the show is no longer broadcast live like in Karise's season. Matthew's audition was filmed in February. They weren't seen on air until August of that year.
When my blind audition aired, it was kind of crazy to be living my life vicariously through like a version of me that was like 6 months earlier.
Like Karise, Matthew became a bit of an overnight success. They were interviewed on Breakfast TV the morning after their audition aired and saw an influx of online fans.
In sort of like the 48 hours that followed, I think it was something like 800, maybe 1,000 new followers overnight, which is crazy. I'd certainly never been more popular in my inbox. And it was the first time that I'd ever been like, wow, this is really overwhelming, actually. It was pretty immediate. Like, to be honest, though, like the coolest thing is that people have reached out to me and been like, my son has cerebral palsy and loves performing and loves sport, and, you know, his eyes lit up when he saw you on the TV. And like, those are the really nice things.
Matthew's audition has now had 250,000 YouTube views. They went on to sing in the battle rounds. Even at the time, Matthew could see the narrative that was playing out for them.
I knew that they were kind of sending me down this heartthrobby kind of road. I was happy to play the game and I was happy to sort of be the product that they kind of wanted me to be. The way they presented me on the show was very, very inoffensive to what I think the main sort of demographic is of shows like that, which I think is predominantly middle-aged women. You know, they sort of presented me as this sort of like, you know, old Hollywood star looking thing. Like the Errol Flynn was thrown around a bit and I was singing Anthony Warlow, who everyone in Australia loves.
It was a narrative that Matthew knew didn't represent their whole identity.
Like no deal on the show was made of my sort of like gender fluidity. Like I identify as non-binary. Nothing was made about my bisexuality. So I was sort of presented in a way, not that was like inauthentic to myself, because I was never on the show being like, oh, I'm this like straight guy and, you know, whatever. But a lot of things were sort of not said that could have really changed the way that I was perceived by the public.
And in today's world, you don't really need to wonder how you're being perceived by the public. They'll tell you on social media. This became a problem for many of the artists portrayed less palatably than Matthew was. They say show producers suggested that if contestants did read negative social media comments, they should never respond. And there were negative comments.
A lot of people were really, really nasty online to a lot of contestants on the show. In a way, I felt this weird sense of guilt. Like I escaped a lot of it. Because I think the toughest lesson that I learned was that people think that just because you're on TV that you're fair game for any sort of slander. And people would write about them things that they would never say to their faces. The show did a really poor job of getting rid of really harmful comments. And I think we thought that more would be done in that sense.
Matthew signed a contract that acts like a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. They can't tell anyone they've been on the show until it airs months later, and can't film anything that isn't on phones provided by the show. Many artists even leave their jobs to take part in the competition. And they are paid for their time, but not a lot, according to Matthew.
Basically, you get a daily allowance of money. It's not a lot. Like, it's filmed in Sydney, and so I was there as like an interstate artist, and so all of the interstate artists stay at the same hotel together. And there were no like cooking facilities in the hotel. There were no like fridges or anything like that. So you basically had to eat out all the time. I was bleeding money, essentially, just like hemorrhaging my bank account. Some people just can't financially afford to be on the show for as long as it runs for. If you're there until the final, it's sort of like 6 weeks of no work.
Matthew's time on the show wasn't just memorable for their advocacy or overnight success, but for how brief it was. They made the decision to leave rather than be eliminated.
This is where I don't know how much I'm actually allowed to say or not. I mean, if there was anything that they didn't want to happen, my mic wouldn't have been live, basically.
Sometime before or after their battle round, Matthew can't confirm, they told the producers they'd been offered theatre work outside the show.
Leading up to my exit from the show, I knew what was going to happen and the producers knew what was going to happen. Those are pretty much the only people who like knew what was going on. So it wasn't like, there are some people online who think that I just like hijacked the show for like 15 minutes of fame or whatever. And that wasn't the case.
Matthew won their battle round and the show continued on like normal until the final episode of Battle Rounds. With the top 24 contestants standing there, Matthew interrupted the host to announce their departure. In true The Voice style, it was a dramatic moment. After the initial shock, Matthew was wished the best by all 4 coaches for their role in a Melbourne production of The Grinning Man. By the time their Voice exit aired on TV, the theatre show had already finished. Matthew rightly assumed that some people would do their digging and be critical of their leaving The Voice for a small production that only ran for a short time.
To those people, I'd say like fair, but I had to pay rent somehow, and It was the first time that I was able to play a character with a disability on stage. It was the first time that I got to work with other actors with disabilities on stage. And the lessons that I was able to take away from that job, everything was worth it. I had no regrets whatsoever.
Filming of season 13 of The Voice continued on without Matthew. Remember, the whole show is pre-recorded now, meaning live performance rounds are a thing of the past, and so is most audience voting. The public no longer gets a say in who advances at each stage of the competition. The first and only time there's a public vote now is the grand finale. But it's still all pre-recorded. So how do you film a winner's reaction before the public votes them in?
As far as I know, they film all of the 4 finalists winning and their reactions, which is crazy to think about.
All 4 finalists act out their winning moment without knowing if it will ever air. And they have to stand on stage celebrating their competitors as everyone else's pretend victory is filmed in turn.
I can't imagine how long it would take to reset and things like that. And the poor people who aren't media or camera trained to have to act that way is crazy. That's a really hard position to put yourself in, is to pretend that you've won and not know that you have.
The lack of a record deal as part of the prize partly feeds into the narrative that The Voice has yet to produce a winner who becomes a huge music star. And maybe the program is more about the celebrity judges than the talent it discovers. But it also gives the winner a lot more freedom to develop their own path forward. Prize money and studio time, plus the exposure of the show. It's a sign that the music industry is shifting around these competitions.
I think that not everyone goes on the show wanting to be a superstar. Success looks different for everyone. I think that social media in particular means that there is no one avenue to success for anyone who goes on a show like this. We don't really sell CDs anymore, I think one of the reasons why early seasons of Idol were so successful and X Factor and Australia's Got Talent and things like that, people won those, would put out albums that everyone would go and buy and they'd go number 1 or platinum. But we don't live in that world anymore.
Matthew has no regrets about their time on The Voice and has seen the impact a national profile can have for a career in entertainment, especially if you know what you want out of being on the show.
I think that having an agenda, that agenda kind of sounds like a gross word, but it's what it is. I think going on those shows, having an agenda means that you're sort of always in the driver's seat the whole time. And you're always sort of able to steer things in a certain direction for the benefit of yourself. I suppose the most meaningful things that come out of something like this, I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of all abilities theatre companies from this. And obviously those are things that I'd always been interested in. But, now that I have somewhat of a platform or somewhat of an identity within that space, they become more interested in sort of reaching out to me. And so to have those things pay off, even if they're not huge contracts, those are the things that make me feel like everything that I've done was justified on the show.
The Voice is still running, and a revamp of Australian Idol started up again in 2023, bringing back judges like Marsha Hines and Kyle Sandilands, who you might say takes on the role Dicko described in episode 1 as the bastard judge. To this day, former Idol judge Dicko says he's often asked, "Should I audition?"
I go, well, yeah, it depends. If you want to get on TV, go for it. If you want a career, no. And that's it. Hand on heart, in 2025, I absolutely cannot advise someone who's serious about being in the music industry to go on a reality TV show. Because it won't be for them. It will be for the TV show. The only reason they will get picked or advanced is because they can deliver good television, not because they've got potential to be a recording artist or sell tickets.
Dicko says the original Idol might have changed things for a couple of years, but that it's not a reliable way to break into the industry.
If you look at The Voice and now Australian Idol since it came back, they're not creating careers. They're not doing what Guy and Shannon did or Casey Donovan. They're not creating stars in the same way that we did.
Australian Idol, like The Voice, no longer locks its winner into a recording contract. And maybe Dicko's right that these shows aren't a way to build a career. But young artists like Matthew Hearne, who understand what the shows are about, could still use their experiences to build a different kind of career. Stephen Tate, executive producer on the first 7 seasons of Australian Idol, has seen these shows come and go.
Look, there's an attrition with every format on television. There was a pattern there for many years where they tend to drop about 8% per year. And they either need to be rested, which is a very brave thing for a network to do, because what happens is, another network will sweep in and reinvent it, or they need to be reinvented.
With its 12-year reign so far, The Voice seems to be outlasting most other shows. It's hard to pin down exactly why. It could be the star power their celebrity judges bring, or the show's embracing of social media and reaching more online audiences. On the other hand, with the media industry changing, there might just not be anything in the wings waiting to take its place.
So the entire business model for the recording industry has changed. And in fact, for the entire entertainment industry has changed. And the fragmenting of media is the reason for that. But the thing is, there's more eyeballs on screens now than at any other point in history. And the real prize is fame. And it always has been. And what you do with that is up to you.
With so much music being algorithmically distributed across so many formats, and both record labels and fans prioritising platforms like TikTok for their music discovery, cutting through as a new artist feels as though it takes more luck, determination, and good timing than ever. And when it comes to reality TV, whose priority will always be its ratings, not building the careers of its contestants, it seems less likely than ever that they can deliver on the dream they've been selling, that they can make anyone a star. The Moment It Changed Touchdown is hosted by me, Nick Kelly, reported and produced by Cameron Adams. Sound design and original music by Matt Nikolic. Executive producer is Jake Morecambe. Supervising producer is Romy Sher. Producer is Holly Mitchell. Fact-checking by Diana Priestley and Madeline Larson. Claire Weaver is the head of Factual at Listener. Special thanks to Ellen Leabeater and Greg Muller. This podcast was made on Gadigal and Wurundjeri land. If this episode has raised any issues for you, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14.
That was episode 3 of The Moment It Changed Touchdown. And if you want to hear more about what really happens behind the scenes on reality music TV, including Australian Idol and X Factor, you can listen to all the episodes of this fascinating documentary series wherever you get your podcasts. And we've popped the links in the show notes so you can just head straight there. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. The team will be back in your feed with headlines and a deep dive tomorrow morning. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.